Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're steering into what might be the ultimate gamble. The genetic lottery.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when that roll of the dice, could sentence your child to a life of just relentless, untreatable pain?
Yeah.
It throws us right into, well, a brutal question. If you knew that, would you still choose to have them?
And this is exactly where our deepest desires just collide head-on with our most profound fears.
Right.
That yearning to create life, it slams straight into the moral obligation, maybe, to prevent suffering.
Yeah.
And it forces us to ask, like, whose voice really matters here? The parent dreaming of a child or the potential child facing unimaginable agony?
Let's be brutally honest with ourselves for a second.
Yeah.
If we flinch from that genetic risk, are we actually protecting someone else from pain?
Or ourselves.
Or are we just shielding ourselves from having to witness it? Such a fine line, a real razor's edge we're walking.
Think about someone living with the knowledge that a devastating neurological disease is basically their destiny, passed down through their genes.
Oh, yeah.
The conflict inside them must be tearing them apart. A part screaming, why didn't my parents know? Why didn't they choose differently? But then there's another part, fiercely alive, treasuring the love they've known, the moments they've lived, and just recoiling, enraged almost, at the idea of never having existed at all.
Wow.
This isn't just some abstract thought experiment, right? That this is a daily battle for millions of people. What does that tell us about the value we instinctively place on existence itself?
It just smashes that comfortable distance of abstract ethics, doesn't it?
Completely.
We're talking about flesh and blood, about love and loss, tangled up with the cold, hard reality of our genetic code.
Mm-hmm.
And it throws a grenade into the idea of absolute personal choice. When your choice could literally predetermine another's suffering, where do those boundaries shift? Whose autonomy takes precedence?
And that plunges us straight into a philosophical abyss, really. Does a potential person have a right not to be born into a life defined by suffering?
A right not to be? That's heavy.
It cuts right against the grain of so many of our deepest beliefs about life, about its inherent value. And as technology races ahead, this question, once abstract, is becoming terrifyingly real.
Because the future, it's basically here, isn't it? Gene editing isn't science fiction anymore.
Not at all.
It's a tangible power. Designer babies. They're not some distant fantasy. They're a looming possibility.
Right.
So the ethical Rubicon isn't about if we'll make choices about genetically acceptable traits.
No, that ship has sailed, or is sailing.
It's who will be wielding that power.
Right.
By what, potentially twisted definition of worthy and for whose supposed benefit.
Imagine this scenario. A loving couple, both carriers of the cystic fibrosis gene. They desperately long for a child.
Okay.
Now, picture a sperm donor. Genetically flawless, maybe, but emotionally barren. A blank slate. If society starts tallying genetic fitness like, I don't know, Olympic scores, who wins in that equation?
Yep.
Are we valuing the potential for love, for connection, for a rich inner life? Or are we just playing a numbers game with human DNA? It makes you wonder, are we ranking souls or just sequences?
There's a father's story that it haunts me. His son had Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a relentless thief, of life and movement.
Devastating condition.
He called it a living hell. He wouldn't wish it on anyone.
Understandable.
Yet. He also spoke about how his son cracked open his heart, taught him a kind of love he never knew existed, literally reshaped his soul.
Wow. So does suffering automatically erase meaning then?
That's the question, isn't it? Or can it actually be the forge where the deepest human connections are created? And who on earth dares to decree that one life, marked by pain, is inherently less valuable than another?
This forces us to really interrogate our motives, doesn't it? Why do we want to prevent genetic diseases? Is it purely about compassion? A selfless desire to spare future generations from pain? Or is there maybe a darker undercurrent, a kind of discomfort with lives that look different? Lives that demand more of us, more patience, more resources, more empathy, that challenge our comfortable notions of normal.
Are we trying to eliminate suffering, or are we maybe just trying to engineer discomfort out of our own lives?
That's a tough question to ask ourselves.
We love to cling to that romantic idea, love conquers all.
It's comforting.
But what happens when all includes a genetic time bomb ticking inside your child, one passed down by your own hand?
Can love really defeat a relentless degenerative disease? Or is there a brutal limit? A point where even the fiercest love hits a biological wall?
Maybe love isn't about victory in those cases. Maybe it's about endurance.
Mm-hmm. But then the question becomes, how much endurance can we, in good conscience, ask someone, a parent, a child, to bear? Is there a limit?
It definitely echoes some chilling lessons from history, doesn't it? Eugenics.
Yeah. It's impossible not to think about it. And it wasn't always fueled by outright malice, was it? Often it was driven by this misguided belief in scientific progress.
Right. Creating a better society by weeding out perceived flaws.
Exactly. Well-meaning scientists, reformers,
Hmm.
people convinced they were doing the right thing for humanity.
So when we talk about genetic health today, about preventing suffering,
Yeah.
how can we be absolutely sure we aren't just treading a similar path? Maybe with more palatable justifications, but still.
It's a serious concern. As Nietzsche kind of warned, sometimes the most dangerous convictions are those we hold most fervently, believing they're purely good.
Just for a moment, let's try to push aside the ethical arguments, the philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
If you, personally, faced a 50-50 chance of passing on a truly devastating genetic condition,
Yeah.
what would your gut scream?
Yeah.
Before your brain could rationalize, what would that raw primal instinct tell you?
And while we get so fixated on these inherited genes, we often conveniently ignore the epigenetic shadows we cast, right? Through our lifestyles, our environmental impact.
Good point.
Our choices today can actually alter the genetic destiny of generations to come. So where do we draw the line for responsible procreation then? Is it solely about the genes we inherit, or is it also about the world we create for them?
So here's the agonizing choice, it seems.
Hmm.
A world with maybe demonstrably less suffering achieved through genetic curation,
Mm-hmm.
but perhaps at the cost of diversity, of the full, messy, unpredictable spectrum of human experience.
Or the alternative.
Or a world that embraces all of it, the beautiful and the brutal, because that's just the unvarnished truth of what it means to be human.
It really is like a philosophical cage match. No easy victor, no clean win.
And think about this apparent paradox. You have disability advocates fighting fiercely for inclusion, for acceptance, for resources.
Yeah, a vital fight.
And then you have genetic counselors offering choices, often aimed at preventing the very birth of individuals with those disabilities.
Right.
Are these two fundamental ideals just
Yeah.
in conflict, diametrically opposed?
Or are they both, in their own different ways, grappling with our deep human desire to protect the vulnerable and also to shape our own destinies, control our fate, maybe?
Could it be that both perspectives hold a piece of the truth, a really vital piece?
It's possible. It's incredibly complex.
Which brings us back to who gets to define quality of life in these agonizing scenarios.
Is it the hopeful parent? Is it the silent, unborn child who has no voice yet?
Is it the state, maybe looking at healthcare budgets? The medical professional armed with probabilities and statistics?
And what happens when those definitions just violently collide?
Which
they inevitably do.
Whose life is it, ultimately? Yeah. And at what point does one person's definition of unbearable suffering become another's reason for? Well, for never having existed in the first place. Yeah. That's a profound question of identity, isn't it?
I have to admit, I find this deeply unsettling. A real internal struggle.
How so?
Well, part of me clings fiercely to the belief in the inherent worth of every single life, unconditionally. But then I witness the daily battles fought by individuals with severe inherited conditions, the sheer grit required just to exist sometimes. And another part of me whispers this painful question. If this suffering could have been prevented, why wasn't it?
That's a tough place to be, that contradiction.
Yeah. It keeps me awake at night sometimes. It really does.
I heard a geneticist share something chilling once. She said the most heartbreaking conversations aren't usually about the complex science of the diseases.
What are they about?
They're with the parents. Parents racked by guilt for the genetic hand they dealt their child.
Oh, man.
Or even more devastatingly, with those who harbor the secret, unspeakable wish that their suffering child had never been born.
That's the unseen torment, isn't it? The quiet agony.
Exactly.
And this leads us to a really brutal, maybe unpopular truth.
Go on.
Sometimes choosing not to have biological children, especially when you're faced with a high risk of passing on a severe genetic condition, that can actually be an act of profound, selfless love.
A sacrifice.
A huge sacrifice. A quiet one, made for a future that will never be. And yet, society, so quick to judge, often labels that choice selfish or even, eugenicist.
Where's the wisdom in that judgment? it seems completely backward sometimes.
It does.
Look at our social media feeds, right? They're flooded with these flawless, filtered images of newborns. Hashtag blessed, hashtag perfect. We celebrate genetic good fortune.
Performative perfection.
Exactly. But what happens when a child enters the world with a visible genetic difference? When that curated online fantasy just crashes headlong into raw reality?
Does that performative acceptance we see online, does it actually translate to genuine, unwavering acceptance in the messy, unpredictable landscape of real life? I
That's
wonder.
a good question.
Let's be brutally honest now, really stare into the abyss of this decision for a moment. If a prenatal test revealed unequivocally that your unborn child would face a lifetime of intense, unrelenting suffering, would you truly not consider termination? Really?
And what would that choice, whatever it might be, termination or continuation, what would it reveal about the limits of your own unconditional love?
Yeah, or the true depth of your compassion. Or maybe even just your own capacity for enduring pain alongside them. It's like holding up a mirror to our deepest selves.
I remember hearing about a couple, both carriers for
Yeah.
Tay-Sachs. They knew the crushing odds, knew their child would likely have a short, agonizing life.
Oh, Tay-Sachs is brutal.
They had 2 children, both affected.
Yeah.
And apparently, their friends condemned them harshly for it.
Wow. So who was right in that situation? The parents who yearned to love, even for just a fleeting, painful time, or the friends who saw only preventable tragedy?
Is there ever a clear right and wrong in a dilemma that heart-wrenching? I don't know.
Now let's turn that unforgiving lens inward on ourselves, on you, listening.
Okay?
If your parents had known the challenges, the heartaches, the struggles, whatever they might be that you would face in your own life, would you wish they had chosen not to have you? Or are you grateful for your existence, imperfections, and all? Your gut answer to that intensely personal question, that might just be the most honest compass you have in navigating this whole moral wilderness.
We talk a lot about ethics, about treading carefully, about not playing God.
Mm-hmm.
But could it be that our recoil from making these agonizing choices about genetic futures, this thing we label as caution or morality, is it actually just fear?
Fear of what?
Fear of responsibility.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown consequences of tampering with something so fundamental like, you might say, maybe we're just afraid to confront the shadow of our own potential for control and its consequences.
That's insightful. And think about history. For centuries, communities, they often embraced and cared for their vulnerable members. It was just part of the human tapestry, right? An intrinsic part.
Yeah, more integrated.
Now, armed with all our medical advancements, we tend to isolate difference, medicalize it. Has this progress maybe eroded some of our communal empathy, our inherent sense of responsibility for those with greater needs?
Have we traded organic compassion for something more sterile, like intervention? That's a cultural truth maybe worth examining.
Okay, brace yourself. Here's a twist that might just flip this entire conversation on its head.
I'm ready.
What if the question itself, should people with genetic diseases reproduce? What if that's the wrong question entirely?
What's the right one, then?
What if the real defect, the real problem, lies not in our individual genes, but in a society that refuses to unconditionally embrace and support all lives, regardless of their genetic makeup?
So the problem isn't biology. It's us.
What if the problem is a collective failure of imagination, a failure of compassion, not individual biology?
That reframes everything.
And what if our fear of genetic disease, that little nagging thought some might have, maybe they shouldn't have kids, what if that isn't really about the potential child suffering at all?
What is it about, then?
What if it's actually a reflection of our own perceived inadequacies? Our secret fear that we wouldn't be strong enough or patient enough or loving enough to care for a child who doesn't fit some arbitrary definition of perfect.
That's an uncomfortable identity question to sit with.
Yeah.
Facing our own limitations.
Yeah.
By now, I think it's clear to everyone listening, there are no easy answers here. No comforting conclusions to wrap up neatly in this deep dive.
Absolutely not. Some people will instinctively recoil from the idea of preventable suffering. It feels wrong.
While others will fiercely defend the sanctity of every potential life, no matter the challenges.
And the truth, as it so often does, probably lies somewhere in that messy, uncomfortable gray space in between.
Which brings us maybe to the heart of it.
Which is?
The true measure of a society's humanity.
Ah.
It isn't found in the flawless nature of its gene pool. It's found in the boundless compassion it extends to its most vulnerable members.
Mm-hmm. And who is more vulnerable than a potential life? A life hanging in the balance of our deepest fears and, hopefully, our greatest capacity for love.
That's a mic drop truth right there.
So one last time, let's bring it back to you, the listener. Imagine it's your child, your potential pain. Your potential love on the line.
What unspoken fear, what buried belief about what actually constitutes a worthy life? What would truly drive your choice in that moment?
Not what you think you should choose, right? Not the ethically sound, publicly defensible answer.
But what, in the raw, terrifying privacy of that decision, you would choose? What secret do you hold about what makes a life worth living?
If this conversation is shaking you up, if it's forced you to confront uncomfortable truths about your own beliefs, share it.
Yeah. Send it to someone who maybe sees these issues in stark black and white. Let's collectively sit in this ambiguity for a while.
What if this relentless pursuit of genetic perfection, what if it's just a modern echo of humanity's ancient terror? Terror of the unknown, of what we can't control, just dressed up in the sleek, persuasive language of science.
Are we really progressing, or are we just running from the same old ghosts, mortality, imperfection?
And consider this. Which is the more profound act of cruelty? To knowingly bring a child into a world that might not fully accept them because of their genetic makeup,
Yeah.
or to deny that potential being existence based purely on a probabilistic genetic forecast. Ponder that dilemma. It's not simple.
We meticulously screen for genetic flaws with the same kind of anxious energy we use to curate our social media profiles, don't we?
Always seeking that idealized version.
Desperately seeking an idealized version of humanity, terrified of the unfiltered, unpredictable reality of life itself. That feels like a cultural truth we often overlook.
Imagine looking into the eyes of a child you love fiercely, a child whose body is betraying them because of a gene you knew you carried.
Oh,
Could you honestly say, hand on heart, your desire to have them was purely selfless? Or would your love forever be haunted by the ghost of what if? That's a visceral image to carry.
take a second right now, listener. Silently, just list the genetic conditions you personally deem too much, the ones that cross a line for you.
Okay, now dare to ask yourself, by what right do you draw that line for another human being? What gives you that authority? It's a question that demands profound humility.
You might champion pro-choice principles fiercely until that choice involves the potential for a life you secretly, maybe unconsciously deem imperfect.
And then suddenly it transforms into responsible parenting to prevent that life.
Our principles, it seems, often come with these unspoken genetic asterisks, don't they? That's a challenging thought about our own internal biases.
I remember a story. Parents told their child would have profound disabilities, just devastating news. Their unwavering response: disability is a social construct, not an inherent tragedy. We will love our child.
Wow.
And their child, now an adult needing constant care, experiences joy, connection, love. Who are we, honestly, to cast judgment on their choice? Who are we to define the boundaries of love and joy for someone else?
Where does the moral compass even point when we try to distinguish between using genetic diagnosis to prevent disease and choosing a partner partly based on desirable, heritable traits? Is one just science, the other romance? Or are they just subtle variations on the same theme of selection? It feels like a slippery slope.
You might consider yourself compassionate, empathetic, but ask yourself this. Would you willingly trade places with someone living with a severe genetic condition? If the honest answer is no, does that unwillingness subtly undermine your pronouncements on their right to exist or the value of their life? It's a brutal self-assessment, maybe.
Indifference, too. Just indifference to the needs of the disabled or genetically different. That creates a harsher world for them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Quietly preferring engineered perfection, even if you don't act on it, can be a silent, insidious form of harm, like a deadly praise of perfection.
And who truly owns the narrative of a life touched by genetic disease?
Yeah, good question.
Is it the individual living it, their family, the medical establishment, society at large with its opinions and judgments, whose voice is most often drowned out in all of this? It's definitely a question of power and perspective.
I have to confess, I once believed, pretty strongly, that preventing suffering was the ultimate moral imperative, the highest good.
The common view.
Then I started listening, really listening to individuals living with conditions I had previously deemed unbearable, and some spoke of profound meaning, of lives rich with love and connection, despite the hardship.
So what did that make you think?
It made me wonder, did my desire to prevent their suffering, however well-intentioned, unknowingly mean erasing their unique existence, just to alleviate my discomfort with their reality? That's a humbling self-reflection.
Nietzsche again. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. What if our relentless drive to eliminate genetic variation, to smooth out all the rough edges? What if it also inadvertently erases the very friction needed for profound resilience, for the deepest expressions of love and connection?
It's a thought to really wrestle with, that maybe we need the struggle.
What silent judgments flicker through your mind when you see families navigating the world with a child who has a severe genetic condition? Be honest with yourself. That silence, that flicker, it often speaks volumes about our underlying beliefs.
Haven't we all at some point made choices for someone else's good that also maybe conveniently served our own needs or eased our own anxieties?
It's human.
This whole complex conversation, it feels like just that very human dynamic amplified to the scale of existence itself. It's a relatable wound, maybe?
And the takeaway, there is no morally pristine high ground to stand on here. None at all.
No. Every choice is shadowed by profound consequences. It's just this tangled knot where love and fear are hopelessly, inextricably intertwined. Acknowledging that feels like a necessary moral collapse almost, giving up the idea of a perfect answer.
Maybe you, listening, aren't meant to be a hero in this story, or a villain, or even a judge. Maybe your role is simply that of a witness to the vast, unpredictable, sometimes painful diversity of human life. And perhaps your primary choice lies simply in whether you react to that diversity with cruelty or with compassion.
Could you truly, without any lingering sliver of doubt or regret, love a child born with a preventable severe genetic condition, never once wishing, even fleetingly, for the child they could have been? What does that reveal about the boundaries of your own heart? That's a real identity challenge.
And you cannot, with any authenticity, champion disability rights while secretly harboring the hope that genetic screening will eventually eradicate disability altogether.
Yeah, that's a profound hypocrisy, a shame, realism we need to confront in ourselves.
Final personal hypothetical for you, the listener. If prenatal testing revealed your child would be exactly like you with all your flaws, your anxieties, your strengths, your triumphs, would you still choose to have them?
Or do you secretly yearn for an improved version of yourself?
Hmm.
What does that say about your own self-acceptance?
That natural, understandable desire for a healthy child. It can so easily, imperceptibly morph into a preference for a convenient child, a normal child.
And silence on that subtle shift. It's not neutrality. It feels like a quiet act of cowardice, maybe. That's a quiet explosion of truth we need to hear.
What will future generations think, looking back at our current debates, our choices regarding genetic technology? What will they conclude?
Will they see a compassionate effort to alleviate suffering? Or will they see the dawn of a new, more sophisticated, maybe even more insidious form of eugenics? It's a contemplation of a time loop we're creating right now.
Perhaps. Perhaps the most ethical path forward isn't about meticulously choosing which genes get passed on.
What is it then?
Maybe it's about fiercely fighting for a world that unconditionally loves and supports every single child who is born, regardless of their genetic inheritance.
Fix the world, don't try to fix the genes.
Exactly. That feels like the more profound, though maybe harder, challenge. It's a powerful paradox.
I am personally filled with, I don't know, both terror and profound humility when I hear about the courage and the unwavering love of parents who choose to continue pregnancies despite devastating prognosis. I cannot claim to know if they are right. I don't think there is a single right. But the depth of their love and the immense weight of the burden they choose to carry, it's undeniable. It really is.
And that's a shared confession, I think. We're all in this deeply complex arena grappling with these monumental questions that have no easy answers, no clear moral manual.
Yeah. There's a shared sense of confusion, maybe a necessary lack of absolute moral clarity. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of being human in this era.
So the crucial question isn't solely about that genetic dice roll, is it?
No. It's about the kind of world we are actively creating for that child, whatever the outcome of that role.
Will it be a world that catches them when they fall? Or one that pushes them further down because they're different? That's the fundamental choice we make, collectively.
The future of humanity worth fighting for. It's not built within the sterile confines of our genes. It's built in the conscious choices we make every day about who we choose to be for those who don't get to choose their own beginning.
That's our mic drop line, I think.
Definitely.
This deep dive. Yeah, it probably requires a second listen. The layers of complexity here are they're profound. They deserve careful consideration. Consider this your breath plus repeat trigger.
Absolutely. And if this conversation has sparked something within you, if it stirred real discomfort or maybe ignited a new way of thinking, Please share it.
Yeah. Don't let this exploration end here. Talk about it. That feels like the most important call to action.
This has been The Deep Dive, where we try to grapple with the most challenging questions, often without finding easy answers.
Continue to wrestle with these ideas. They really do shape the future of what it means to be human.
Outro music begins to fade in.
Thanks for joining us.
Outro music swells and fades to silence.